The Luhansk Operational Tactical Group under the Ukrainian Armed Forces has prevented a large-scale offensive by the occupying Russian army in the direction of Seversky city in eastern Donetsk region. Despite 11 consecutive attacks in this direction, Russian soldiers were unable to advance. 2 quadricycles, 10 military vehicles, 2 buggies, and 31 motorcycles were destroyed by artillery and drone strikes. More than 100 occupying soldiers who participated in the attack were killed. Ukrainian troops continue military operations on Russian territory, particularly in the Belgorod region. According to Russian military bloggers, clashes continue, and Western analysts claim that Ukraine has advanced several kilometers, Reuters writes. On Friday, several Russian military correspondents claimed that Ukrainian units were in the Belgorod region and fighting Russian troops. At the same time, neither Kiev nor Moscow officially confirmed this information. The Russian Defense Ministry previously said that its troops had repelled several attempts by Ukrainian forces to break through the border in the Belgorod region. The Ukrainian armed forces have refrained from commenting on these events, which may be due to operational security issues. At the same time, President Volodymyr Zelensky noted during a press conference in Kiev that the Ukrainian army had taken certain steps outside the Kursk region to reduce pressure on Ukrainian positions. A representative of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Andrei Kovalenko, suggested that Ukrainian forces could operate in the Belgorod region in order to neutralize threats from Russian troops that are concentrating near the border. The Russian military blog Rybar, which has more than 1.3 million subscribers, reported on fierce fighting in the village of Popovka, where the sides are actively using drones for strikes. The Telegram channel 2 Majors said that Russian troops are conducting defensive operations. Another Russian military blog, Archangel Spetsnaz, reported on fighting in the village of Demidovka, claiming that Ukrainian troops were surrounded there. There is no independent confirmation of this information. According to analysts, the Ukrainian operation may be aimed at distracting Russian troops, who are actively fighting in the Kursk region. The military blog, Rybar, claims that Russia has already transferred reinforcements to Belgorod from Goptarovka in the Kursk region. Finnish military analyst Emil Kastajelmi from Black Bird Group believes that Ukrainian troops were able to break through the first Russian defensive lines and advance 3 to 4 kilometers into Russian territory. The Ukrainians could theoretically take a few more villages from the border area, but that's not what constitutes a breakthrough. It would be a small tactical success, but there's very little that can be achieved on the operational or strategic level in the Demidov direction. There's not the necessary element of surprise, and the Russian presence in the area is strong enough to at least conduct largely successful defensive operations, he told Reuters.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is deliberately humiliating US President Donald Trump by further attacking energy infrastructure and putting forward new crazy conditions. This was stated by the head of the Center for Countering Disinformation, Andrei Kovalenko, on Telegram. His propagandists laugh at Trump's team on air and call the US president himself an enemy and a chatterbox. The exit from sanctions by the Russian Federation is only needed for additional investments in the war, Kovalenko said. Russia, according to Kovalenko, attacks Ukrainian cities with shahids every day. Moreover, according to his data, the Kremlin is going to increase this number of attacks in the coming months. Russia's goal is to discredit the United States at the global level, Kovalenko summed up. US President Donald Trump seeks to change the status of Russian ruler Vladimir Putin from a pariah to a partner, says Ivor Bennett in a report for Sky News. The journalist calls this moment significant. For the first time in over 3 years, Washington is not increasing sanctions against Moscow, but instead talking about lifting them. This is the clearest confirmation of the rapprochement between the US and Russia and a clear signal of Trump's intention to build a partnership with Putin. For now, it's about a partial easing of restrictions that will allow Russian exports of agricultural products and fertilizers to return to global markets. It's worth noting that Russian food products and fertilizers have always been formally excluded from the West's sanctions list. However, actual difficulties in exporting arose due to the Russian bank's disconnection from the European-based SWIFT system. As a result, payments were delayed and transactions carried high fees, even in trade with friendly countries. Moscow is seeking the removal of sanctions on Russelkhozbank, the key state agricultural bank, and the restoration of its access to SWIFT. This can be seen as a small easing of the sanctions regime. However, such a step will have serious symbolic importance. Western allies of Ukraine were united in imposing a sanctions front against Moscow. But now, one of the strongest supporters of this policy is starting to dismantle it. Additionally, there is concern that the Kremlin will use this concession to its advantage, such as pushing for the lifting of restrictions on the supply of agricultural machinery. These restrictions were imposed because some components of it could be used for military purposes. Is there a guarantee that these parts won't end up in weapons production? Washington may trust Moscow, but Kyiv certainly will not.